Hi everyone, welcome to the first in our series of chats with startups and startups who are working in the sustainability space. So today I'm joined by Nat from a startup called nornnorn, and we'll be talking about the mattress industry and understanding what their innovation or innovative business model is about, and what kind of things we would like to understand about this industry that makes this different. So thanks for joining us, Nat. We are in weird times with this pandemic, but it doesn't mean that business stops completely. I think there's a lot of things that people are still doing despite the different industries they're working in. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Before we go into talking more about what you have or your startup, just give us a little background about yourself, and how did you get there? What's kind of I guess motivated you into this venture?
So my family has been in the mattress industry for a very long time. I think nearly 100 years now. So it started from the time of my great granddad, who came over from China. He migrated from China to Thailand. I think in the early 1920s, and then he started a small factory to make cotton mattresses, which were probably in vogue at the time. And then in the next generation, my great granddad was the first person in Southeast Asia to start a spring and foam mattress factory. So he did that, I think, to meet the demand of the American military at the time, and it was the time of the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s, I believe. And then my parents themselves, they left the big family to set up their own mattress and bedding business as well, to ride the tourism wave in Thailand and neighboring countries in the 80s and 90s. And so after finishing my education in the UK, I came back and joined my parents' business straight away. And first in the BD role, like branding and BD, and then after a few years, I got promoted to become like the vice managing director. So my job back then was to elevate the business to the next level. So my job encompasses all aspects of the business, really, like all kinds of development, from like marketing and sales, finance, to production and HR, etc. And I think over the years, I tried to figure out what we could do to make a positive impact on the environment and on the world. So we did a lot of CSR, but then I just kept wondering whether there could be any tweaks that we could do to the core business model to make it more sustainable and to make it more impactful. And then I came across this idea called the circular economy towards the end of 2014 at a conference in Beijing. And that really got me thinking, that whether we could adapt a form of circular economy business model to our industry, to our core business. And then I decided, and it was really hard to make such a tweak or do such an experiment within the existing family business framework, because it's a lot of risk, right? And then we didn't want to risk the entire basket, so to speak, with this experiment. So I decided to step away and created nornnorn. This was back in I think I stepped out back in late 2016 to give myself a time to think through everything and conceptualize everything. And then eventually we raised some money. It was actually my uncle who first invested. He was our angel investor, so to speak. And then so that allowed us to establish the company in early 2018. Yeah, so that's pretty much the whole story. So that encompasses the entire century of our family in the relationship we have with the mattress industry.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's always the challenge in any industry, when you're looking to kind of, you've come from that rich history and you understand the industry very well. It's like, what motivation would you have to think about a completely different way of doing something, especially if your family or your business has done well from that and has kind of crafted and made a name for themselves in that industry. You talked a little bit about a desire after you did some CSR, right? Your company was always doing kind of CSR initiatives. I guess my question there would be, what was the motivation behind the CSR initiatives or kind of including more CSR into your business initially? into the existing
I
business?
think it came from ourselves, and because I think my parents and our family as a whole is pretty charitable, and then we like to do good things for the people. And I think it all stemmed from that. That I think deep down we just wanted to contribute, to give back to society in whichever way possible, in our own personal capacity or like through our companies. And it wasn't anything like massive. Like I think initially we just gave away or made some donations to schools and to orphanages, and then over the years we decided to make it more like related to our marketing effort. Like we came up with this like a Tom's shoes business model. Like if our customer buy one, we would donate one mattress to like someone who was in need, for example. So we just experimented with a lot of things, and then because at first we saw that if we were more like if we were seen as being more charitable, then maybe that would also help improve our image, like our brand image and our reputation, and that might in turn translate to an increase in sales. So we experimented with like a lot of campaigns, like a lot of different marketing campaigns, but at the same time we also kept donating to people, like especially at times when people were like really in need. Like we helped out during the tsunami back in 2004, and also during the great flood in Thailand back in 2011. We also donated a lot of mattresses to like people who were rendered homeless by the situation.
And so what do you think pushed you? I mean, I understand that you said you went to a conference in Beijing, right? And you saw something around the circular economy there. What do you think pushed you sort of finally further to think that you needed to do more? Like, why were you not satisfied with just kind of giving, philanthropy or donating mattresses? I mean, although that's obviously very, very worthwhile and important, what pushed you beyond that stage, do you think?
I mean, we were doing good things, but I felt like, it was a bit shallow, if you see what I mean. Like, it really, it's almost like we did good things more as an afterthought. But then I'm a strong believer in the fact that, businesses could be a force for good. Businesses could be like a force for real changes for the world. And because after all, like, I believe in the concept of triple bottom lines. We shouldn't really just aim to achieve profit. We should also aim to achieve something else as well. Like, because in a way that makes our business more meaningful. Because at the end, well, money is important, I think, but then it's not everything. I think it's more important to have like a meaningful like business that also like contributes in some way to humanity, to like society or to the world. And I think the only real way to achieve that is to change our business model. I think I got inspired because at the conference, like someone from Interface, which is like one of the world's leading carpet manufacturers, came and talked about their circular economy business model. So I thought it was really inspiring. So like Interface, I think if you haven't heard of Interface, I think they use like waste from fishing nets, I believe, and then they turn the fishing nets into carpets. So they kind of complete the whole circular economy model with their business. So that was really inspiring.
Interface is a really good example, and I mean that's not the only part, obviously, of their business which is sort of addresses the sustainability issue. I don't know if you know, like they even have kind of the rentals. What they have is carpets for rent, right? Or carpet tiles. It's built in within their design system to have tiles which are replaceable, so you don't then have to replace the entire carpet within an office or wherever the carpet is.
So I think it was a really like inspiring example, and I thought maybe we could do the same thing for mattresses. And then we did see anyway that there were like some like problems, so to speak, in the industry that could be answered by a more circular economy model, not just from the sustainable or like waste point of view, but then also from the actual demand or just to like the ability for us to meet the demand of some segments of the market. Because then we could see that at the time like that a lot of customers they didn't have enough budget to purchase high quality mattresses, so then they would end up buying poor quality ones, which would only lasting maybe 2 to 3 years. So at the end, they might, because usually like quality mattresses would last between 7 to 10 years or even longer. So, but then some customers who can't afford that kind of mattresses would end up buying really cheap ones, which are not only uncomfortable, then they only last like 2 to 3 years. So so at the end, like over like a long period of time, these customers would end up having to spend more, like having to invest more in mattresses than they would otherwise, than they should do otherwise. So so anyway, so at the end we came up with the rental model, the subscription, which would basically allow our customers to pay monthly, like for the use of mattresses. So the mattresses are still brand new, are still like high quality, but you don't have to invest like a lump sum into mattresses. You can just pay a bit every month to use the mattresses. And because we incorporate the cost of recycling into the monthly subscription fees, at the end we do have enough resources to collect back those mattresses and take them all apart and recycle or upcycle everything. So so in this way, like obviously we complete the loop. So we pretty much like eliminate the concept of waste, and we give a second life to all the components of mattresses. So mattresses are just like sandwiches. So mattresses used in hotels are usually made out of foams and steel springs. So the springs could be melted down, for example, and then turn into something else. And the foams could actually, in theory, be chemically broken down as well into what is called polymonomers, which could then be used to create other products. So there's no more waste. And so just to give you like a sense of how big of a problem this is, so globally every year, like people throw away around like they throw away like hundreds of millions of mattresses every year. So, and mattresses are really bulky, so they have to go somewhere, right? And usually like they would end up in the sea probably, or like they get burned somewhere randomly, because all hotels have this issue as well. They don't have anywhere to like dispose of their used mattresses. So usually they would try, obviously everyone tries their best to like to deal with the disposal in the most responsible way possible. So they usually like try to donate the used mattresses away, or they would try to sell them to some of their staff. But then at the end, like there would still be a lot of used mattresses left, especially the ones that are kind of like damaged beyond usability. So our service also helps them deal with the disposal mattresses in a more responsible way as well. Yeah. So I think at the end, if you look at the bigger picture, by giving a second life to a lot of components like steel springs or the foams, we would ultimately help reduce the amount of virgin materials that need to be extracted from the environment, from our planet. And because the extraction process like uses up a lot of energy, if we could reduce the amount of extraction, then we could also like reduce the amount of energy used as well, which would in turn help reduce the carbon emissions of gases that trigger global warming. So this is how we fit into the bigger scheme of things. Yeah, but it's all based on the circular economy idea, the idea that everything should have a second life, and then we should try to eliminate the concept of waste as much as possible. Yeah.
I see. Wow. Thanks for explaining that. It's quite a specialist knowledge about the mattress industry that you have there.
Yeah, but yep, go on.
Yeah. So how can you explain a little bit about what your solution is specifically? I mean, you've described quite in detail what the problem is. So you talked about kind of you have a mattress rental or subscription model, and then so customers then pay to rent these mattresses, and these mattresses and the rates are kind of on par or equal to buying or less than if you bought a high quality mattress outright. Is that correct?
Yep. So that's exactly what we do. So we enable our customers to instead of doing an outright purchase of mattresses, to just come and rent, or they can just subscribe, and then they would get brand new mattresses delivered to their hotels or to their like accommodation businesses. To give you an example, instead of them having to invest maybe $30,000 upfront, they would just have to pay like, let's say $500 a month.
So it allows them to control the cash flow as well within their business.
Yeah, and then they
based
could use
yeah.
so they don't have to put in the lump sum investment, right at the beginning, and the investment they so saved could be used for something else more productive. And I think this might be really relevant given the situation we're now in. Cash is now really king, and it's really best to save as much cash as possible and delay and postpone the payment to later. And hotels usually love this because when hotels is a very long-term business, they get their revenue over time. So like a lot of hotel owners, they would rather invest like as little as possible at the beginning. So they would prefer to like pay, slowly over time. So essentially, you think if you're like a finance person, we convert what should be capex, as in capital expenditure, into operating expense. So that's what we do, yeah. And so overall, they would end up spending more, and as in like, but then the extra spending would occur over like a very long time, like 7 to 10 years on average. And they spend more because at the end they would also like contribute towards the recycling costs as well. Because mattress recycling is not a profitable business at the moment. That's why no one is doing it. Even in advanced economies like in the US or the UK, like no one actually. I mean, people try to do like mattress recycling, but then they tend to lose money and go out of the business like after like a few years. Because at the moment the economic value of these mattresses is actually very low. Like steel springs have some value obviously because they're made out of steel, right? Which is in turn related to iron. But then foams are the world is pretty much inundated with foam waste at the moment, so they virtually have no value.
So there's a high supply and no demand.
No, because if you think about it, foams are actually everywhere. Foams are in your sofa, in your like office furnitures, in your mattresses, beds, whatever. Foams are actually like everywhere. And then people don't really talk about this. People talk about the disposable like plastics issue, like like plastic bottles and so on and so forth. But then they don't talk about the big like plastic waste items like furniture, for example. So obviously people have to all these furniture and all the use like big plastic items, big foam items have to go somewhere after the end of their lifetime. So that's why the world is inundated with foams at the moment, and foams are pretty unhygienic as well. Like if you imagine like if you sleep on your mattress for like 10 years, like all the sweat and everything would like somehow gradually seep into the mattresses and then into the foams. So that's why a lot of recyclers don't really accept foams, like used foams or foam waste, because of this hygiene or this like biocontamination issue.
So by closing that loop, I mean, by offering to obviously remove that and then being able to kind of control all the source of all those kind of materials, you're also able to then, I guess, manage those different waste streams, like you said, the steel, the kind of foam elements, and also, I guess it's quite pure in a way, then where the sources are or what the materials are within the mattresses.
Yeah, that's exactly what we try to achieve. So by using our service, our customers would also support our recycling process at the end, and so that's something we are working on at the moment. So we only started our business back in 2018. So we are now expecting the first lot of mattresses to come back to us in around 6 years' time. So we have between now and then to figure out how we would recycle everything. So I think the steels is not a problem. We can just like sell them off as metal scraps. But then foams is a bigger issue that we are working on at this point in time. So we're working with a research institute in Thailand on this, on how to chemically break down the foams. And then, so as I mentioned, when chemically broken down, the foams could be turned into polyol monomers, which could then be used to make other things. So that's the research that we're working on at the moment. Because a lot of people ask me, why don't you just recycle the mattresses now? But then it's not a financially viable business model. So if we do it, it's going to be more like a charity. We would keep relying on like external grants or donations to keep the whole operation running. So I would rather create a way to generate more revenue to subsidize the recycling process, so to speak, at the end. But then obviously we are also aiming for the recycling to achieve break even. I think given more research, that's a realistic goal. But then to do more research, we also need money. So like as we scale up the business, we would generate more revenue, which would then be used to drive the research. Because otherwise there would be no money to do the research, to begin with. And I think given the climate now, it's really hard to find the money for research, which might not at the end even yield, monetary returns.
So you said you kind of started really a couple of years ago, right? And you have a few customers, is that right?
Now we have 7 customers. So we have customers in Thailand and Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. And given the current climate, that's one thing, the kind of economic climate with the pandemic. I mean, what's your kind of strategy to bring on more clients apart from these 7? I guess the question is, like, how is it's easier to convince companies that are already on this kind of sustainability, circular economy or circular solutions journey? What are the other companies would you be targeting, or would you be targeting those who are already doing this, or new kind of people who aren't yet involved in kind of sustainability or the circular economy, or who are interested in kind of this positive impact within their business?
I think the lowest hanging fruits, so to speak, are like boutique hotels who might not want to invest a lot in mattresses to begin with, and then we're also like more interested in doing things in a more sustainable way. I think those are the lowest hanging fruits, and I think we see a lot of them in Bali at the moment. But we also have, I think, before the advent of COVID-19, we also had a lot of interest from like bigger hotel holdings as well. We're more interested in sustainability, and they also wanted to make a change in the way they do things. And if anything, I think these bigger hotel groups or holdings or chains, they have even more problems because they have like a lot of hotels, sometimes like tens or hundreds or even thousands, right? So they would have to throw away like a lot of mattresses every year. So they're looking for like a solution, to manage the mattress disposal.
What do you think is driving that interest also from the hotels? Do you think there's kind of demand from like sustainability departments in those hotels, or customers and kind of patrons of those hotels? What do you think would be driving some of that interest?
I think it all comes from like, the market demand, right, from customers, because at the end that's what drives, businesses. If customers demand a change, they want to see our planet being more well looked after, then they would also demand businesses to do the same. And then that's why hotels are changing. I think that the rate of change in Southeast Asia has accelerated over the past 2 or 3 years. Because when we first started, there wasn't much conversation on sustainability or like on circular economy even. But then I think I noticed like that over the past 1 year or 1.5 years, there's been much more conversation, much more discussion on this topic. So I think the momentum was gathering before COVID-19, and I think that momentum would return probably in full force after the end, or after we see some recoveries in the economy. Because I think at the end, people are now more aware of the fact that we are really fragile. Human beings are very fragile and actually physically quite weak. And then they might want to look after themselves better to maintain their well-being in a much more substantial way. And then that would in turn mean that they would also have to look after their planet, because our well-being could only come from like a healthy, well-balanced environment. So it makes sense for people to look after our planet more, and then that would in turn drive hotels and resorts and hospitality businesses to kind of double down on their sustainability effort, I think.
Hopefully people are understanding and now starting to see the connection between, kind of the planet well-being and our own physical well-being as human beings existing in this environment, on this planet. That connection, I think, has become much more apparent in the last 3-4 months, where people have noticed a difference in their air quality where they're staying,
definitely,
or in the water pollution and the amount of waste and I guess just pollution around.
Basically you can't be healthy yourself if your environment sucks. if you breathe in, filthy air every day, how could you be healthy? Even with all the money in the world, you can't really fully isolate yourself from the environment. You can buy the most expensive air purifier, but then it doesn't really eliminate every single particle of dust in your bedroom, for example.
Yeah.
But I think people would, like start making that connection. I think that connection, if anything, has already been made, like by people in big cities across the world.
Okay. Yeah. So what can you describe some of the challenges that you've faced with what you're like doing right now with the mattresses-as-a-subscription service?
I think so. I think a lot of smaller hotels owners, especially in Thailand, is what I can see. They are reluctant to rent because they don't like the feeling of having this long-term obligation, and also they don't like the feeling of owing someone anything. So I think we are trying to change that mindset. And I think the second thing is investment. So now we're now scaling up, or we should return to scaling up once the COVID-19 situation gets better. So we're looking for investment as well, both in the forms of debt and equity. Because in terms of,
so what kind of investors do you think would be perhaps more open to what you're looking for, your kind of business model and the returns there and the time horizons?
I think first of all, the investor has to come in from the right angle. Like he must believe in our business model and in what we're trying to achieve. And then ideally he should understand. He should have an extensive background in finance and also maybe in the hotel industry as well. That would be like a plus. Yeah, because after all, our business model is a play on financing, and I think there's actually more than enough money in the world to like support our kind of business, and the debt component. I mean, people are scared of the risk. People, obviously, hotels could default. They might stop paying the rent, for example. But then I think we can control that through like a lot of predictive algorithm, because in the future we are trying to move our pricing model from a static one to like a more dynamic pricing. So we could adjust the rental fees according to the customer's risk profile that could be determined by like a predictive risk algorithm. So I think the risk part could be handled, or we could even ensure that at the end. So there's a way around it, I think.
Tech?
Pardon?
Sorry. So you're using tech and algorithm-based prediction?
Yeah, exactly. Like, because I think like a lot of players in the fintech space are working on this, how to like predict a customer's or like a person's risk profile or like a business's risk profile more accurately, using like unconventional, not all like non-traditional like data. I think a lot of fintechs are working on how to use like social media data or like other forms of data to predict the risk, the financial risk, or the credit risk of a business or of a person. So I think if the investor is really interested in this kind of business, in pushing forward or driving forward the circular economy concept, then he or she would be the right person for us.
Okay. So what kind of partnerships do you think you would need to establish in order to develop your business model? Like for example, you talked about like the investors in the hotel industry. I guess I'm particularly interested in the recycling partners, and like, how does it work, especially if you've got kind of bulky items? How are they sort of moved around, or how does that work?
So we work with, so in terms of supplies of mattresses, we work with leading manufacturers in each of the country or region, that we operate in. Like in Thailand, we work with Springmate, which is connected to my family as well. And then in Indonesia, we work with Springer, and in India, we're working with 2 or 3 other brands. So these are like, leading brands that could be trusted. And with regards to the recycling, I think we would need to set our own recycling plants at the end. So that's something we're working towards as well, because there's no like professional mattress recycler in this part of the world. I think that's obviously due to the fact that mattress recycling doesn't really make money at the moment. And also there's no regulation on disposal, on waste disposal in our part of the world at all. Like, so there's no incentive for anyone to recycle mattresses. Like for example, in Australia or the US, and you have to, I think in certain states at least, we have to pay to throw away your mattresses. But then in Southeast Asia and in South Asia, and probably in most countries in East Asia, you don't have to do that. You can just leave your mattresses somewhere randomly, and no one would find you. Yeah. So, and also, we also need to form partnership with research institutes or researchers as well. As I mentioned, we're working on trying to find a way to break down the foams, and I think in the future we also need to work with researchers on our impact matrix, and just really show to the world that our business does help reduce the carbon emissions.
And do you have kind of like a life cycle analysis going on as well? Is that something that you've been working on or have already?
Yeah. We were about to start the research on that before COVID began. So now everything has been delayed because we basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to compare how much carbon emission our business model would save, like versus traditional outright purchases of mattresses. Because obviously with the traditional outright purchase, at the end you will throw away the mattresses. So you would lose all the materials inside those mattresses. But then with our business model, we would recapture or retrieve all the components and then give all those components a second life. So as I mentioned earlier, so by doing that, we would help reduce the amount of virgin materials that need to be extracted from the environment. And then since extraction requires energy, and energy requires like carbon intensive fuels in general, we would in turn help reduce the carbon emissions. So we have to come up with a quantitative assessment and see how much carbon emissions our business model would end up saving over the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks for explaining that and introducing nornnorn stuff. I mean, we're gonna wrap up soon, but what in this kind of current situation, how do I put this? What would you say is like something optimistic, or what would you be thinking about for the future? Well, how would it look for you in your business, in the world as it is after COVID?
I think regarding our business, I think there should be an uptick in demand, because as I said, people are now, or businesses and people have now realized that cash is really king. So it's better to delay all the expenditure for as long as you can. So I think people might switch to renting rather than doing an outright purchase. And so I think that would be the primary drive for our business. And secondly, like people might become more aware of how we all should protect the world and help tackle climate change and then lower carbon emissions. So that would be a secondary drive, so to speak. And then in terms of what I feel in general, I think I'm still pretty much like optimistic that we should go to save our planet and our civilization, and there's enough money in the world to help us achieve this. I think if there's a will to do it, and it's not like it's not financially unfeasible, and to tackle climate change. We don't have to sacrifice our well-being, I think, too much. If you come up with some appropriate and clever business models, like clever tweaks on existing systems. And I think, because at the end, what we need to see like a change in the way we consume, like a systemic change in the way we consume. I don't think there's much point in like trying to have some like cosmetic changes, in the way we consume. We need to change the whole system, like what we do. We're trying to like change the system from that based on outright purchases to renting, to try to complete the loop. I think that's what we need to see more, in order to save ourselves over the next 50 years. But then I think on the whole, I'm pretty optimistic, and I think COVID-19 hopefully will be like a real turning point